Are there changes on the horizon for the Ottawa Senators? The Canucks honor Roberto Luongo, and should the Penguins look towards the future? Hey everyone, welcome into another edition of Off the Post. Rob Wong, joined alongside by Toronto Sun sports columnist Steve Simmons and Postmedia hockey columnist Bruce Garrioch. And Bruce, times are tough in Ottawa right now. The Senators having lost their last 4 and 7 of their last 10. They sit last in the Eastern Conference, even though they do have some games in hand. But Bruce, the seat is scorching for DJ Smith right now. He did get a vote of confidence from interim GM Steve Staios earlier this year, but is now the right time to make a coaching change?
Well, it sure feels like it's coming. One way or another, it feels like it's coming. And I think that if you look at the way that DJ Smith is coaching this team right now, I think he knows it's coming. And my new owner, Michael Andlauer and Steve Staios, inherited this team on September 21 when they officially took over the organization. Staios wasn't here at the time, but he was certainly working in the background. The fans got their wish, Steve, when Pierre Dorion was fired last month after the botched trade with the Vegas Golden Knights. And I do think if Pierre Dorion was still the general manager of this team and this team was going like this, he would have fired DJ Smith at this point. I think we're at the point now, though, where one way or another, DJ Smith is not going to finish this season. This is me thinking out loud. I don't know anything. I just feel like this team has not lived up to expectations, and we know the expectations were big.
There are times to fire a coach, and there are times not to fire a coach. And the time to fire DJ Smith was a week or two ago. And the Ottawa Senators didn't do it for reasons I'm a bit baffled by. So now, if you make a change now, and I suspect one is coming, because he sure looks like dead man coaching right now when you watch his body language and you see him around the rink. But you look at the Ottawa Senators schedule between now and say the early January. They're on a West Coast trip right now. They have to play in Vegas. They have to play in Colorado. Then they got to go back to the West Coast and have to play in Vancouver and have to play in Edmonton. Normally when a new coach comes in, you want to get sort of a few days off and a lighter schedule to give him an opportunity. Edmonton went 10-5 when they fired the coach. Minnesota went 7-2 after firing the coach. St. Louis is 2-0 since making a coaching change. I don't know if whomever goes in, maybe Jay Woodcroft, whoever goes in as the new coach of the Senators, has the same opportunity because the schedule is so damn hard over the next while.
Yeah, it's tough times, like we said, with the Senators, and we'll see if any changes do happen sooner rather than later. Steve, we saw one of the great goalies of the last generation get his due in Vancouver last week, Roberto Luongo, joining the Canucks Ring of Honor. But some were left wondering if the greatest goalie in team history should have received the ultimate honor and had his number retired. Did the Canucks fall short by not doing that?
Well, I think you look at every team works differently. Some teams honor players, some teams retire numbers, do it that way. If you are the Vancouver Canucks and you retire, I don't know, Pavel Bure or the Sedin twins or whomever, then you should be retiring Roberto Luongo's number as well. If you hadn't retired those guys, then you don't have to retire his number. So it gets down to, I know that the Maple Leafs, for example, they don't necessarily retire numbers, they honor them. And then other people wear them afterwards. And so every team has a different way of going about this. I'm not sure there's a right or a wrong way.
I find the Canucks have like that ring of honor, right? That's how they kind of honor these guys. And I don't.
By the way, I hate to interrupt, Bruce, but if you ever want to be depressed, look at the Vancouver Canucks ring of honor. Like,
well,
if you start looking at the people who are on there, you realize what a crappy history they've had.
The Ottawa Senators have a ring of honor. The problem with it is it's on the third level and nobody can see it. And I sit on that committee, and I know they do want to give it a more prominent place in the arena. And I think that's one of the things they talk about. But back to the, if the Canucks practice is not to retire numbers, then I don't mind that, because I also think you reach a situation where, you can retire too many numbers. And I don't mind the fact that they didn't retire his number. I do like the fact that they did honor him, though, because he had a lot of success there.
Finally, the Penguins were embarrassed on Hockey Night in Canada Saturday night, losing 7-0 to the Maple Leafs in Kyle Dubas's return to Toronto. Despite a great season from Sidney Crosby so far, Bruce, this Pens team does not look like a serious contender anymore. Will we ever see a day where the Penguins break up the band, or are they just going to ride this out like the Blackhawks did with the likes of Kane and Taves?
Well, I think at some point they're going to have to accept reality. You know, one of the things about Kyle Dubas, Steve, is he's got a 7-year contract. So he can take the time to tear this down. I think it's interesting, though, that he went out and got Erik Karlsson when people said, I don't think Erik Karlsson and Chris Letang are going to work together. And it doesn't appear to have worked. That power play has had a very, very tough time. You know, I kind of feel like at some point Dubas is going to have to accept reality. I just don't know if that day is soon, because he's going to feel like you know, they're going to get out of this. I don't have any doubt in my mind they're going to get out of this, Steve. But that may just tempt him to make moves to help the team rather than maybe accepting the reality.
Well, I think one of the reasons Jimmy Rutherford left the Pittsburgh Penguins is because he wanted to start over, and ownership at the time said, no, we've got Crosby and Malkin and Letang, and this is still a team that, you know, you can take a run with. And he didn't agree, I don't think. And eventually he left and wound up in Vancouver. And then Dubas is in there. And he did the same thing. He bought into as great as Sidney Crosby's playing, and he's one of the best players in the NHL this year, that's a bad hockey team. And it's a bad hockey team with a great player, which you wonder if Crosby was just having an ordinary year, how bad would this team be? So I think they're in trouble for two ways. One, the team as it is right now isn't good enough. B, they don't have very many, if any, great prospects. And so where are they? They're caught in that terrible middle. They're not good enough to be a contender, and they're not bad enough to get an early draft pick. And where do you go? And their draft pick was traded, by the way, in the Karlsson trade, although it is protected. But, you know, I just don't see how Kyle Dubas works his way out of this mess.
You know, they call it the mushy middle, and it's a place you never want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where the Penguins stand at this moment. As always, leave your thoughts in the comments section below. For Steve Simmons and Bruce Garrioch, I'm Rob Wong. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next week on another edition of Off the Post.